I think it's so important for each Christian to believe that you have to wear the jersey of Christ and never underestimate your voice for Jesus, because it's going to resonate with somebody.
Right.
Your testimony is going to do the same thing for somebody else in another way. It's going to be a seed for somebody's salvation to come to the cross.
Right.
And so maybe God takes us through those opportunities in our life to experience things, not so we can get bitter about it, but so we can get better and understand and be more empathetic to people that deal with very hurtful situations much more than we do.
Just trying to move too fast. So die so you can be present in the moment. See, if I die, then I can't move past right now.
That's right.
And so it's just better if you die. You know, die to your flesh, die to yourself, die to your agenda. Just say, God, use me. Allow me to be present in this moment.
You know, as a white guy walking into the locker room and being like pretty much the only white person in the locker room, I'm just sitting there, I'm prejudging the way they feel about me without even giving them a chance.
Wow.
You know, mental health is something that I'm an advocate for in regards to not staying where you're at. Let's get you to where we know God has intended for you so that you can walk out your calling and your purpose for your life.
Beautiful humans, welcome back to another episode of I Like Birds podcast. I am so excited about today's episode. We have two phenomenal guests in the building who are some kingdom warriors for Christ, who put on for Jesus in their daily lives and their daily encounters with people. We have Sly Stemley, my new friend. Make some noise for Sly, everybody. He is an ambassador with FCA. And I just love our connections that we've had so far. And we have my man, Ken Butler, who I've been doing life with for a little bit over a year, 2 years now. Yeah. And he is an area director for FCA. Make some noise for Ken Butler, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up? Let's go.
It's funny every time, but let's just dive right in, gentlemen. We are all kind of involved in FCA in some kind of role. My audience knows, and if they don't know that are listening, if you're first time tuning in, make sure you subscribe to the show. First time tuning in, I've done some character coaching with FCA where I was a part of a high school basketball team in Mansfield Legacy. Which was an incredible experience and one that I hope that comes in the future again with another school or another opportunity. But I was able to just see on the ground what your ministry looks like. And so talk to me a little bit about what FCA has been up to in this season of life and how much has evolved since you guys have started. I'll start with you, Sly, since you're right across from me.
You know, FCA is, this past year, we ended the past year reaching about 3,000 students across 10 schools in Mansfield. That's 5 middle schools and 5 high schools. We entered the year probably somewhere around like 800. Is that accurate? 800. And so, God has been doing some amazing things, and I'm honored that I get to be able to be a part of it. But I'm even more honored, Zach, that I get to work with Ken, because we're able to show people what it looks like to have a kingdom partnership. 2 guys that come from different backgrounds.
No, really?
That. Yes, sir. Unfortunately, yeah. You know, we didn't get to grow up in the same neighborhood. You know? But people say we look like brothers, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, put your mic up a little bit so we can a little bit angled. There you go.
Yeah, so it's been cool. It's been cool to be able to partner with him in just the Mansfield area. You know, Mansfield's my responsibility. So I have, even this year, we're adding the intermediate schools. So we're expanding, and it's expanding fast. So
let's go.
Man,
Praise God.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go.
That's exciting. And Ken, you've been at it for how many years now?
This is year 23 for me.
23?
Yeah,
wow. All with FCA?
Well, the first 16 of those years were as a volunteer. So
wow.
I was approached when I was a youth pastor. This guy, my role, the area director at the time, comes up and says, "Hey, man, would you want to serve as a chaplain or a character coach for a football team?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, you get to go and share the gospel in the locker room with a football team." And I'm going like, "You can do that? Like, that's legal? Like,
that's legal?
We're allowed to do that?" You know? And so I'm like, "Yeah, sign me up, man. This sounds awesome." So yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was, jumped right in at Sam Houston High School in East Arlington and served there, and would go every Friday, do a chapel service with them, and was ingrained right into the program on the sidelines with the guys on Friday nights, and it just became a part of who I was. I mean, it was really like the time of my week, honestly, that I looked forward to more than anything else, was that 8-hour window on Fridays where I was getting to go hang out at a public high school share the gospel, build relationships with coaches and athletes. And I'm just like, why isn't like everyone doing this? Because this is like the coolest thing ever. So that was really my introduction to FCA. Did that for 16 years as a volunteer, and then transitioned onto staff 7 years ago.
Wow, that's incredible. I love that. That's such a long journey to be in the same kind of field of ministry. So when people think of like, oh, they took prayers out of school, what does that look like when it comes to being able to spread the gospel at school? So where's the fine line that you're allowed to, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do?
People say they took God out of schools, but they didn't take God out of schools because they didn't take God's people out of schools.
Hey, amen.
And so we are followers of Christ. We are on campus. We're with those students. And people, I think, don't realize the amount of freedom we actually do have in our public schools to go in and just be who we are in Christ and share that with people, whether that's faculty, athletes, teachers. And, Sly has really done a great job of stepping onto campus in different ways, maybe outside of the traditional FCA thought process to serve our schools, and it's made a huge difference. I think you should share a little bit about that. I think it's been really cool to watch.
Yeah, over the last year, actually I would say 2 years after COVID, right? The schools were like, hey, things are different.
I believe that.
Right? And a door opened up. There was a coach, his name was Matt Allen, that when I first found out about FCA from a advisory period perspective of having a Bible study was in 2014. I walked into his classroom. He invited me. So I was a character coach, and he invited me. He was like, yo, on Monday, I want you to come hang out with me. I didn't know what I was walking into. I walk into the classroom, and I see some scriptures on a projector, and I'm like, okay, what's this all about? Because somebody about to get fired. I'm not going down with you. And so students start coming in. And after about 5 minutes, he probably had like 60 or 70 students in there. They're sitting on desks. They're filing in. There's nowhere to stand, nowhere to sit. And I'm like, yo, what are you doing? It's like, oh, we're about to have FCA share time. And so I'm just sitting back watching, and he begins to present the gospel. And after everyone leaves, I'm like, how are you doing this? And it's like, oh, it's during advisory. And so I get to choose what I would like to do. And when post pandemic, the district was like, hey, we're looking for volunteers to come out and do all kinds of things, to talk to Ken. It's like, hey, let's pitch it and see, if it'll work. And so we went before the school district and was like, hey, we feel like we have something that could help in this season for such a time as this. We feel we are confident that if you give us an opportunity, we will have a positive impact on the school and the school district. So we tried it with a few schools during the advisory period, literally a 15-minute period. So you're presenting the gospel for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. And some of those moments we would see in the beginning, 5 students show up. Last year, after the end of the year, I would say that we grew maybe 50, 70% of that first year of the pandemic. But then after that, the second year, man, we went from seeing like 20 kids to 50 kids to hundreds now. Some of these huddles grew like not only double, triple. And so,
dang, that's a lot.
It's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids.
A lot of kids coming. I mean, sometimes they're running across the campus to hear the gospel.
What?
Sound
like Billy Graham show.
Man, it's wild. It's wild. It is wild. Like when I say it's wild, we had one school, Mansfield High School, 300 kids showed up just for worship.
Wow, that's powerful,
for a
man.
15-minute worship set.
And you don't see that on the news. You don't even see that as a parent. They don't share that with the parents, do they?
Check this out, Zach. This was last year, right, Ken? With Summit High School. We outgrew a conference room. We started out with 5. We outgrew it. We hit 150 one week. And I was like, yeah, this is not safe because there's literally nowhere to walk. So we moved to the basketball gym. First week in the basketball gym, 50 salvations.
50? What happened? Was there like a gospel preacher? The worship?
No, well, we had
sharing?
a guy named Troy Dix. He shared the message. I don't even remember what the message was, but he didn't do the call. I did. So at the end, I was like, I'm feeling the prompting. So
there you go.
So I walk up, and because we're in the basketball gym, so it's like bleachers are full. All right, I have to show you the picture after the show, but man, it was beautiful.
That's powerful.
It was beautiful just to see God.
Take a look at that right there. And Ken, I want to ask you this: while we're over here talking about this, how have we experienced the fruit of the salvation that we're experiencing in the youth? Like, has that transitioned into or translated into other kids being also saved because their friends get saved?
Yeah, we've seen students, and we've done a great job, I think, of having those students that come to faith to raise them up into spiritual leadership. To say, this is not our ministry; it's your ministry. You go make disciples now. The Lord has moved in your life. Now you're to be obedient. You have to take what you've learned, the life transformation you've experienced, and go share that with your friends. And so it's been really cool to see now, after a year or two, the second generation of students coming to faith, not through us, but through their peers.
Wow, that's powerful. And
powerful.
That just shows us I got to find a better way to put this, but I always say sometimes, being a follower of Jesus and being vocal about it, it's kind of like you're trying to get everybody to, it's kind of like a multimedia marketing thing. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme. But God's pyramid scheme, it trickles down into other people in their lives, and you'll never get to be able to see how much of that is present. You might not be able to see the fruit of that all the time, but the fact that this has generational impacts on so many lives when y'all are just being obedient and you're in the schools and you're sharing the gospel, and the fact that you're going to the place that I feel needs it most, maybe outside of prison or homeless shelters and stuff like that, but for the grand scheme of things, the youth, it's just that's so so powerful. And then how did y'all find yourselves in that situation of this is what I do for a living now? Because you've been an ambassador and you have experiences of struggling with faith and God, why are you not with me? And maybe share a little bit about that, Sly, and your journey to becoming an ambassador with FCA.
I grew up in the church. I'm a church kid. I grew up around the church, in the church, family, all that. And I would say that for myself, I didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus. And, after I graduated high school, I was on this journey of trying to go to the NFL, thinking that was going to be what I was going to do.
Oh, you got skills?
Man, I was kind of nice.
All right,
I was
cool.
kind of nice. I was
there
all
you
right.
go. That's for the people,
Yeah, I was kind of nice.
We don't got no scrubs on I like birds.
Yeah, right. If they are, they ain't got no wings. So, I ended up meeting a guy that I was working out at the gym. I ended up meeting this guy named Ignacio, and he introduced me to his church, Fellowship Church out in Grapevine. Give my life to Christ out there, and just began this pursuit. But I've always had a draw to sports, love sports, and God opened up some doors where I had an opportunity to work with pro athletes. And sometimes some of these athletes were young. We're talking middle school all the way through professional careers, right? And I'm still in contact with a lot of these guys.
Any names you can drop?
I'll drop a couple. Let's see, TJ Antone. He actually went to Legacy. And so he played baseball there. He's actually right now currently playing for the Reds, Cincinnati Reds. I got to walk with him throughout his high school year, through college, and through his pro year, pro career right now. Since I didn't get permission from other guys, I'll leave it at that. But I've had an opportunity to work with players of all sports. We're talking baseball, basketball, Super Bowl winners, actors, all kinds of artists. And God, I remember this one time, I got an opportunity to do a Bible study at a player's house. I can say the neighbor. He lived behind Jason Witten, right, over in Westlake, and there was other players there. And God had showed me a glimpse, this is what I need you to focus on, not trying to get back to the NFL to become a trainer, for an NFL team or trying to go back and play. I need you to focus on taking the gospel to these athletes because you have a connection. And I got a first taste of that when I ended up at Mansfield High School. A kid had invited me to come and share, but he didn't tell me I was going to share. It was he set me up, bro.
Really?
He set me up. He was like, yo, can you come with me and hang out with some friends and have breakfast in the morning? I'm like, okay, sure. And his name is Isaac Stip Puffer. Isaac, if you see this, Appreciate you. But I thank him because he invited me to FCA. I had no idea what FCA was. But at that time, I actually had a nonprofit that I had started because I wanted to go and speak and be a motivational speaker in schools. So Isaac invites me, right? And he then tells the coach, but didn't tell me, that he was going to have me share. So the coach was like, hey, Isaac has a friend here that's going to share a word. And I'm looking around. I'm like, what is going on?
What you mean word?
Right. And then Isaac was like, hey guys, this is my friend Sly, and he's gonna share a word today. And I'm just like, what are we doing? He's like, hey, yeah, just share with them what you told me about your testimony. And so that was the first time I shared at FCA at Mansfield High School. And I was able to connect with a lot of those students outside of the school and see them in the grocery store, just see them, out around town. And they were just like, man, thank you for sharing your story. And that was my first taste of FCA.
That's cool.
And then I fast forward, get connected to FCA through the school. Me and Ken hadn't met yet. And I become, character coach. I would go and speak pregame and stuff like that. And then we finally ended up connecting, and the school, Lake Ridge was like, hey, can you just be our primary guy? And so it's my DNA, like being on campus and sharing the gospel, loving on kids. And sometimes I'm working with, coaches and teachers. And it's not just, here's the cool part. It's not just spending time with athletes and coaches. We're serving the students that are not athletes, and we're serving principals and teachers as well.
So you're not missing out on the ministry opportunity that strikes you on the way to the ministry opportunity that you're heading towards.
Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I like how you did that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Because we were just talking pre-show about that. I let the audience in on a little pre-show note. We were talking about in Matthew how when Matthew was called, he was working as a tax collector. And Jesus, on his way to another ministry opportunity, stopped to encourage Matthew to follow him while he was at the workplace. So kind of share with us like your heart behind that, what you were like studying and what you were picking up from that piece of scripture today, and the full picture that you gave to it. It was beautiful. I want to hear it again.
Yeah. So I've seen this text. I think we've all seen this text before. We've heard it. We've seen it. And the thing that God showed me in this is that so often we can be so distracted. We can be too busy thinking about where we're going, and that can keep us from being present from where we're at. And Jesus is walking alongside the shore, and the scripture tells us that he saw, and the question I had to ask myself is, how many things am I not seeing because I'm already thinking about where I'm going? All right. And then the next thing that the scripture tells us is that he said to him, how many people am I not speaking to as I'm on my way going to?
That's good.
And then he gets to the house with Matthew, and he has some guests there, and something that I'd share with you a pre-show was what I've been convicted of is that I've aligned some people in my life that I've said, hey, I'm going to disciple you in this season, but I haven't fully allowed them to come into a very close proximity of my life. And the cool part about that story is not only did he have this moment with Levi, who we know as Matthew, he also had a moment with some of Matthew's friends, his co-workers, right? Those that may be associated with Matthew that didn't have a great reputation. And I had to ask myself, like, okay, it's one thing to be a disciple maker, but are we also loving and in community with those that are not followers of Christ? And we see them in mixed company, and a lot of times we want to find comfort in who we have company with, but Jesus shows us that's not how we did it.
That's so true.
It wasn't. He was around people that had things to say. Like they were talking like, who is this dude? What does he think he's doing? And like they were literally saying that.
And they even, if you look in other places of scripture, where were all the parties at? It was always at Matthew's house.
Always.
So like all of Matthew's peeps were coming through.
And it said that he threw a feast, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, this wasn't like just, it's having coffee. This is like, hey, let's go and get some Starbucks. No, this was like, he allowed Matthew to be who he was, and he stepped into that.
That's right. And it wasn't that where he was also being kind of condemned. Jesus was being condemned for having dinner with the sinners.
Absolutely.
So isn't that interesting how it all kind of connects?
And he knew, right?
Yeah.
He knew he was going to get condemned, and I think we worry too much about what
what the Christians think.
Come on.
Oh, don't start.
No, we definitely
There
gonna
we go.
start. This what are we about? 20 minutes in? This is usually about the time we get going with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but no, and that's a real thing because it's like, there's such a difference between, I'm a Christian and then I'm a follower of Jesus, and I don't think it should be that way. It should be, the same statement, but somehow in our American culture, we've seen that they're two different things, like I can have a conversation with Ken and be like, oh, he's a real one, like I don't have to worry about like, oh, he's not walking, and all this stuff. I feel like once you're in the battlefield, you get your stripes, would you agree to that? Because you're like, y'all see that like, ministry is like, it's taxing and it's like, you have a big old question mark. You have doubt all the time. You're out here, putting blood, sweat and tears and time and energy and sweat equity into making sure that the gospel is being spread. Have you guys experienced that in y'all's ministry, Ken?
We have. It's really cool to watch. You talked about the God pyramid scheme earlier. I'm old enough now that I'm seeing the fruit of that, right? It's
got to be a better way to say that.
It's got to be a better way.
I like
it. Let's keep it there.
Let's keep it there. Ponzi, what's that Ponzi scheme? We're running that. But yeah, so I know some of those guys. The coolest things, you put the effort in. We talk about those uncomfortable environments, and I'll just share, and I hope it's okay to just be kind of frank. But when I was at that youth pastor role, my pastor looked across the desk at me and said, "Why are you over there in the East Side serving the black kids?
Wow,
those kids aren't coming to our church."
Sounds like Remember the Titans.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and I'm thinking to myself, but then it starts instilling doubt in you, right? Are you doing any good? Are these kids actually listening to anything you're saying? Mm-hmm. Do they care? Do they respect you enough to listen to the message you're sharing from the scriptures? And it's I'm 50 years old now, so I see guys. We have a guy at one of the Mansfield high schools that was on that first team that I served as a chaplain and character coach years ago. And guess what? He's helping lead FCA now. Right.
Nice.
And you make that investment into people, wondering sometimes, will you ever see the fruit of that blood, sweat, and tears, of the standing on the sidelines in the rain at games or in the freezing cold, and like, why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I out here? But we talked a little bit about it earlier. Our ministry is such a ministry of presence.
Ooh, I like that. Let's stay there.
It's a ministry of presence. And if we're not willing to be present in the good times, in the rough times, in the rain, in the freezing cold, we'll probably be out at games next week when it's 106, sweating like crazy with these kids and with these coaches. But they see, hey, they're with us. They're present with us. They're part of who we are. They care about us enough they're going to go through the struggles with us. And that type of ministry to me is it's so rewarding because you're not doing ministry on your own terms.
That's so true.
You're not doing ministry in comfortable environments. You're not doing ministry, you control the narrative, right?
You can say it. You can say it. You're not doing a podcast.
No. So you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to come up, right? And so, are you ready for that? And do you have an answer? And are you present in a way where you're earning the trust of people that may not trust quote unquote Christians?
And are you having a daily encounter with the presence of God to be able to handle those presence moments?
Yes,
that happens. And I was able to experience that in Africa. When you talk about like a real boots on the ground, like needs are here. Are you going to meet those needs? And I was shared with my mother-in-law, who I got a whole new perspective of her ministry when I was able to see firsthand like what she was doing out there and like the team that she had, what they were doing out there with the widows and the orphans. And I'm just sitting there thinking like there would literally be somebody knocking every single day on the house. We need something. And it's like she would have to go out there and like talk to each individual about the need. And she would just keep adding it to like this long legal pad list. And I'm like, the list was so full by the time we're at the end of the trip. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, what are you going to do about all this? She's like, pray for a lot of money and give it to God. And I was like, yeah, but like, that's a lot of people. Like, what are you going to tell them if that don't come through? She's like, well, the only thing I can do is minister to the one in front of me. And I was like, ooh, that's the subtitle. That's the subtitle of the book, because it was 100% like in that moment you were able to see like all that other stuff that you think is like, oh, I'm gonna go spread the gospel to many and they're all gonna accept Christ. And it's like, boom, and somebody comes up to you and is like crying because they don't have enough money to eat or enough water or enough clothing, and wants, they see what you have and they want that for themselves. And you have to be able to handle that situation with like grace and like with the love of Christ, and like, Lord, help me steward my heart posture in the right direction and help me get the words to say in this moment, and just teach me like how you would handle the situation. You don't experience that until you're present in the ministry field.
That's good. That's good. There's a saying that I have: it's better if you die.
What do you mean by that?
The problem is many times we get too caught up in our agenda, but it's better if we die to our agenda, die to where we're trying to move too fast. So die so you can be present in the moment. See, if I die, then I can't move past right now.
That's right.
And so it's just better if you die. Die to your flesh, die to yourself, die to your agenda, and just say, God, use me. Allow me to be present in this moment. Like he was saying, when we're serving the student, the athlete, the coach, the teacher, I can't be thinking about how many followers I'm going to get. I can't be thinking about how many salvations I'm going to get. I need to die and be present in the moment, because if not, then I'm not really following. I'm trying to lead Christ.
That's true. Dang, that's a bar.
I'm trying to lead him
Yeah.
with my cross, not his cross. So I have to die. And with the guys that I mentor and disciple, I tell them like, hey, when I hear them talking and telling me what their thoughts are, it's like, okay, I just need you to die first before you move forward.
That's interesting. How has race, because you guys, you're all from the same, bloodline.
Are we?
How has race, bloodline of Christ, baby. How has race like been a contributing factor, especially in the sports and the schools world? Because my experiences when I went to do the character coaching, there was definitely a wall that I had to kind of like chip down just by being around, being myself, connecting with the guys before they were able to like build that trust with me. And I think it was like 18 black kids, 1 white kid on the team, so it was a completely like, I was coming into this situation of like, okay, so how long do I have to take to break down this wall to where I can actually start building a relationship with them? And it didn't take long, but how have you guys experienced that in your ministry?
I think for me, it is about trust. And I think there's different factors, gender, race, it's all a factor, right? Because building relationships with people is tough. And I think athletes and coaches in general are pretty, they distrust people because people always want something from them, right? And so, especially high profile athletes, coaches, they've got parents, kind of criticizing them from the stands, hey, you learn how to coach, and they're under this constant pressure of just who can I trust and who really has my back and who really does care about me as a person, not for my role or what I can offer them. And so I think it's just earning the trust of being consistent, being authentic, like you were talking about. Those walls come down pretty quick. And I think over time, even as I served at that school for 8 years in East Arlington, it was cool because I didn't feel that after being there for a period of time.
Right.
At first, I was more self-conscious about it, I think, than what it really was, right? Okay. As a white guy walking into the locker room and being like pretty much the only white person in the locker room, I'm sitting there, I'm prejudging the way they feel about me without even giving them a chance.
Wow. That's real. Yeah, no, for sure. You start to kind of sit yourself in a box of like, oh, this is what they think about me just because we're not dapping up yet. It's like, right. You don't even know them yet. It's like, relax.
Yeah. Day one.
Yeah. Like
5 minutes.
Yeah. They lost their first game. Don't take it hard.
Right. Right.
Like
that's why they're not talking to you.
Yeah. So it's like they're salty,
Yeah. I would say, to kind of piggyback that, there's a saying that I have to tell myself is vulnerability is the vehicle for victory. Right. And I got that from athletes sharing with me that, hey, because you were very vulnerable when you came to be with us, that helped build the trust for myself or others to then feel like we can share certain things to you or even really give you an ear when you come to speak.
What ways were you vulnerable? Like, what does that look like?
It might have been upbringing, right? I've had, Zach, I've been through battles with depression, anxiety. And so I'm the first to share. Like, I've been in counseling for a long, I'm an advocate of counseling. And so when I share those things and you got athletes that's just like, this dude right here got depression, anxiety, I'm going to counseling. Immediately that chips the walls all the way down, because of that, me being transparent in that moment. I can't tell you how many athletes that have thanked me for opening up about my mental health. Mental health is something that I'm an advocate for in regards to not staying where you're at. Let's get you to where we know God has intended for you so that you can walk out your calling and your purpose for your life.
How have you grown in that way? Like, how has that shift happened and elevated you to being a big advocate for it so that you're able to help other people with that?
So I've done counseling I think this year will probably be 20 years. I haven't done it for 20 years straight, but I've done some type of counseling. Right now I'm looking into starting EDMR. Yeah.
Is that a music festival?
EDMR. That's funny.
Thanks, Taylor.
EDM. But yeah, so I usually try to share some of my story. I don't share all of it because I think there's a time and a place. But I truly believe that there's some unique parts of our story that we do need to share. And so athletes especially, they go through a lot, right? There's a lot of pressure to perform, to succeed. There's a lot of athletes that are playing and they're only playing because their parents want them to play or their siblings, or there's all this pressure. And so that can add on to your mental health, right? So you're following a bloodline of athletes and you never wanted to play, but you know that your family's going to view you different, or friends or people are going to view you different if you don't play.
Wow.
Or you feed off of the attention that you saw your cousin or your brother get. And so you're playing not knowing that this is adding to your mental health, right? And so for myself, I never really had to struggle to start a team.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things came to me naturally.
Right.
And so when I went through seasons of growing up, I was blessed to have a brother that was very talented. So I was around a lot of people that were older than me, so I had to play up. So it prepared me. But at the same time, I fed off of that. When you take sports away, what am I going to replace with that now? So I start feeding with things that of the world, the drinking, the smoke, all the things, right? And so I believe that those seasons of life that I leaned on things of the world didn't help my mental health.
That's so true.
But I didn't know that, right?
Yeah, it's the pleasure. Yeah, Solomon. Yeah, you should have read Ecclesiastes. You'd have been good.
Right. And so, man, the students, athletes, they're seeking these things a lot sooner than
we realize. And your story connects with them because like God couldn't use maybe Ken or myself to be able to reach these people that you're reaching. And that's why I think it's so important for each Christian to believe that you have to wear the jersey of Christ and never underestimate your voice for Jesus, because it's going to resonate with somebody.
Right.
Your testimony is going to do the same thing for somebody else in another way. It's going to be a seed for somebody's salvation to come to the cross,
right.
And understand that, I am forgiven. I am made righteous because of Christ. I am on the path of sanctification because of Jesus. The Holy Spirit is with me to help me get to this point. And being able to instill that into the youth, like that is so powerful. And like, that's why I have so much love and respect for y'all's ministry. And that's why I love that y'all are here to share it with the people right now, because like this, where else can you see that? Where else can you find that besides FCA on a big scale like that? So I commend you guys. I respect you guys for doing what you're doing in the schools. And that's incredible. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And you guys are actually on the journey and the path and thinking about also starting a podcast to get your story out there even further, right? So talk to me a little bit about that, Ken. What's on your heart and what's it called and what's the vision looking like?
It's really about kingdom ministry. I think that's one of the things that FCA has provided to me as a platform to try to connect the local church to the schools, and then connect people of God to the schools and each other, and being a kingdom connector. So we want the focus of the podcast is just to show folks how it could look let ourselves get in our little box, about this is our ministry, this is our church, this is our approach, and we won't get outside that box to do ministry together. Because I do think when you see churches work with nonprofits and other faith-based initiatives, and even just being willing to step into the schools and ask questions like, what do you need? Like, people that knock at the door, right?
Yeah.
What would it look like if the church actually went to the school and knocked on the door and said, hey, what do you need?
Right.
Instead of just trying to cram their programs, into the box that they think the school needs. And so being able to have a platform to where we can have guests on, have people come on and talk with us and share kingdom initiatives, kingdom ideas, best practices, things we're seeing. Sly's done a great job of, we fed all the teachers and staff at the high schools and middle schools last year in Mansfield. That's not an FCA thing, right?
Right.
But we invited the local churches to come with us, right? And say, hey, we're not going to fly the flag over it. We're not flying the FCA flag over it. We don't want you to come necessarily in all your church gear, and like make a big deal. Let's just be the church, right? Let's be God's kingdom to people that have a really difficult job and have some struggles, right? And so I think having a podcast where we can bring different perspectives on that is going to be really fun and really cool, and look forward to having some students on to talk about their experience with FCA, and maybe some coaches that have had their lives impacted through FCA, but also just, come like this and getting around the table and sharing, about what's happening, what God's doing, and maybe folks will tune in and say, you know what, we could do that. Like in our community, we could do that.
That's right. Because this has global reach. This has national reach 100%. And it's on so many different platforms. Even this happened yesterday. 2 things in one day. Patreon, which is where people can go to like support you, doing like a monthly subscription. Ken, thank you. You're on my Patreon. Truly appreciate you, brother. You actually got a steak dinner last time we were here. You won a steak dinner on our show.
Yeah, I'm fired up about that. I love me some steak.
So that's super cool. But Patreon actually just partnered with Spotify. So now that if you're a Patreon member, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify. That way you don't have to like go to Patreon, like a separate app. You can kind of boom. You already have Spotify, boom, it's right there. And then also TikTok just opened up the door for if you post like a clip, you can connect your podcast to that clip so that on the screen it says, oh, listen to the full episode. Boom, you click it and it takes you right to the full episode connected to your RSS feed. So like these 2 little things that happen are big things, because it just shows that like, the podcast world is actually evolving, and we need to, if there's so many voices out there, worldly voices, like Joe Rogan and, so many others, I love me some Joe Rogan, but that's a worldly voice. You don't believe in God. That's just the truth. Like, I keep trying to find video footage of him saying, I believe in Christ, but it hasn't happened yet. We're praying for salvation for Joe Rogan, y'all. Amen. Let's go, Lord. Come on, touch some Holy Spirit. Go to his studio, right now, touch him with the Holy Ghost. But to all that to say is that like, we need to be voices out here for the kingdom, and we need to make sure that we're also pouring into the youth through the video content, because that's where they're at. We have to go where they are sometimes. And that's a big reason why we started this video footage or the video podcast, is because I was seeing the audio. It's so much harder to get people to just listen to the audio. I was like, they have to see you. They have to see what's going on. This is where they're at. They're on the social medias. They're on the TikToks and Instagram reels and all that stuff. And it's able to really tap into a new audience and grow your net out further to be able to bring people in, because that's where they are, so I love that you guys are on this mission to do that as well, because obviously you have 20 plus years of experience in FCA and 20 plus experience dealing with athletes, and boom, you combine that together, and you're over here just bringing in a whole different audience than I would ever bring in as, former comedian and author and all that stuff, So, it's just cool that you guys are up to it. And Sly, you have some experience doing some podcasting as well, right? So you're kind of taking your, what you've learned and you're applying it to this new venture, right?
Yeah. During COVID, I tried to use Instagram and Facebook to do my own thing. And it was fun, but it was initiated through a conversation with a pastor friend of mine, and we were just kind of talking about mental health and what I was currently walking through.
That's usually what the best podcasts are.
Yeah, he was like, "Hey, let's hop on and make this live, because I believe people can benefit from hearing your journey that you're walking through, and with all the things that were taking place during 2020 with social injustice and just the darkness that was looming around the world. I've had my own encounters, right, with social injustice and just just some dark valleys I've had to walk through. And so 2020 was difficult. And a lot of people saw me thinking like, oh man, that dude's strong. He works out and, there's no way that he could be dealing with mental health. And so I had an opportunity to be able to just share with the world what I was walking through and how I got through it. Sometimes it was more sharing application principles that I might have been applying daily, whether that was through workout or meditation, and really just trying to, allow them to be inside of the valley with me, and to see how I didn't just stay there and I walked through it through things like fasting. Like fasting was something that changed my life during 2020. Like I would go from fasting 18 hours to 20 hours to 24 hours to sometimes 2 days, right? Still working out, but it was very beneficial for my soul and for my mental health.
In what ways? Like, can you elaborate and be kind of specific on what ways it was beneficial for your soul?
I fasted from things like, obviously food, but then I feasted on God's word more. Okay. Right. So versus trying to replace it with hopping on social media or
you kept it holy.
Yes. So I was trying to sow things that I knew that would have a return on investment.
Right.
Right. And so, because Zach, man, my mind was all over the place and I was still going through counseling.
Right. It's 2020 though.
Right. And so, God was like, look, I need you to press in more. And so, I would just be in my office sometimes for hours. Sometimes it'd just be with the lights off. And I wouldn't break my fast until I felt like God was like, okay, now it's time. I didn't just break it because I hit a certain timeline.
Right.
He was like, no, would you go a little bit longer? Sometimes I'd like, okay, I heard him. All right, it's time to go eat. He's like, no, that wasn't me. That was you.
Right.
I need you to die in that moment. That's not me, and then I go another 2 or 3 hours. All right. And so it helped me to really be able to saturate myself on his word. And I'm telling you that the healing was something I had never experienced before. There was areas that I got healing in and revelation in, even to the point where it allowed me to be able to know that I was not to go back to my former employer, and I was really to pursue FCA and marketplace ministry. And so the fasting was extremely beneficial for my soul and for my life.
I love that you said that about the healing, because I do feel like we be getting healed and we don't even know it sometimes, and like the revelation that came from that is incredible. And like just the spiritual clarity he gave you on what to do, like next, I think that's big. And 2020 is actually the same year I got, I would say saved, like I always kind of had, Jesus in my mind, because I would go to church, but it was more so like I read the gospel for the first time and like Jesus came to life when I read the word, so I've shared that plenty of times on this podcast because it's just so exciting. But that's actually the same year. So it's interesting that you say that. So what are you guys calling the podcast?
I think we're leaning towards keeping it kingdom.
Ooh, keeping it kingdom.
Keeping it kingdom.
Yeah, all things kingdom.
I like that. And that kind of, lets the audience know right away, like, what they expect, like when you tune in, which is so good and so important when it comes to a show title. Obviously people are still confused about like birds if they never, like, I didn't really think of that one. No, but I love that we called it that. But yeah. I like the keeping it kingdom. That was great. That's a great, and you guys are so big into that. Y'all are so kingdom minded and making sure that what it's about. Even when I talk to you about, Ken, even when I talk to you about setting up a meeting with our pastor at Thread, I misspoke and I said something that I knew that you literally just told me like a week ago that was not the case. And I'll say it on air because this is funny. You said you said specifically, we don't encourage churches to like go and do the FCA thing to bring people to their churches. And I'm over here right when I'm introducing y'all, I'm like, yeah, it'd be good for like Thread to like introduce. I said the exact same thing you literally said not to say, and I felt so embarrassed. I was like, well, I knew that. Why did I say that out loud? But it's so good because you're so like kingdom minded. You're like, it's not about the church attendance. It's not about going out to these schools and bringing kids to the church. It's not, oh, I hope you help me. No, it's like all kingdom. How can we help the kingdom on both sides of the aisle? So I love that.
And that is really the thing. I think that was the selling point for our relationship, right? So Ken hits me up in 2020 and he's like, hey, this George Floyd thing happened. He was, can I share this? I didn't approve.
I was hoping you would, because I like to piggyback off of it. Yeah.
So Ken calls me and he's like, hey, and he didn't tell me what he was going to ask me. So we're on Zoom, and he
live.
Yeah. So we're on Zoom, and he's like, hey, can I ask you a question about George Floyd? And he left it at that, and I'm like, man, where is this going? You know what I mean? Like, dude, you really want to talk about this right now? You don't know how I feel right now.
Did he have fentanyl in his system?
You know what I mean? And so
was that going to be the question?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, where is this going? And so he began to become curious.
Okay. Was this like in the midst of everything, or was this like once down the road?
Hot. Okay. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay,
like,
it was hot then.
I'm thinking, Ken, this is the wrong time to be asking me this question, sir. You know, and so he began to just lean in and say, hey, I remember these words. I'm asking, can we have this conversation? Because I feel like I'm ignorant in that area. I want you to coach me up. And I want you to be honest with me and tell me if you've ever dealt with something similar or like this. And I sit back, because, you know, everything's virtual, right? So I sit back in my chair. I'm just like, okay. All right. Yes, I have, actually. And so I began to unpack with him, you know, some run-ins I've had with the police force that were unfortunate. There's moments that, is the time when I was going to pick up my daughter, and I had pulled up to her daycare. And this was 2019, so this was right before that happened. And the cops thought that I was somebody they were looking for. They were extremely upset. And all I could think in that moment was, I'm about to die in front of her classroom. I'm looking at her classroom window to my right. There's a cop car to my left that almost hit the front of my truck. And there's a cop car that's on the backside of my truck. I can't see him. But the rage and the intensity of the cop, the yelling and the hand on the gun, and I'm just thinking, this is not good. Because they're saying, where is he at? And I'm like, well, who are you talking about? Tell him to get out the back. And I'm like, I'm thinking, okay, if I move, what's going to happen? And Zach, I'll be honest, like usually I carry. So I'm now thinking, do I have it on me? So all these thoughts are running through my head, and I'm like, this is going to happen right in front of my daughter's daycare room. And he didn't know that. Like I hadn't shared that with him, a piece of that story, and we knew each other, right? And so when he asked that, I'm thinking like, can I tell him this? And will he do what some did? Because in that moment, they figured out that I was the wrong individual. Asked me for my license, takes my license, write down the number on a notepad, throws my license, and then they take off. And that was the end of that. I then shared that story with some people right after. And I'll be honest, like I was bawling. I called my wife. I was like, I was shaking. I was like, I can't get her right now. I'm not good. And so I then shared with some other people, and they were like, oh man, they just got the wrong person. It's all good. And so when he's asking me, I'm thinking, is his response going to be the same? Because that isn't the first time I've been through that with cops. Mm-hmm. I've been pulled over because I had my speakers were too loud, or, you know, because of the car I was driving, and it's just, I've been through way too many, and I've been dismissed when I've shared. And even now, like sharing, this is probably one of very few times I've even shared the story publicly like this. And so when he began to become curious, it took me to a level of comfort with him to know that, man, this dude has a kingdom mindset. And so when we began to talk about FCA, I was like, I can see myself getting on the front line and being an ambassador for the kingdom of heaven as his teammate. Mm-hmm. Sign me up for that.
I love that. And let me ask you this, because there was one part of your story that was just, it moved me a little bit in a kingdom way. And the way the people that responded to you, I have to ask you, have you forgiven them for responding to you that way?
I had not. Yes, I have, but I had not forgiven them in that moment.
When you were talking to Ken?
Oh, yeah. And actually, I would say it wasn't until 2020 when I was able to
Put that at the feet of Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, because when I was fasting, he was bringing all things like we need to talk about this.
Right. And also, I think, I think people try to give other people benefit of the doubt, naturally, or they don't want to believe that something like that could be happening from what is not. I mean, they're not supposed to be like that. You know what I mean? Like, and your experience with that, it's like brings up a whole bunch of questions. Would that have happened to a white dude? Would that have happened to a Spanish dude? Would it happen to a woman? It's like all these questions you can ask that you'll never know the actual answer. Right. But to take away your experience and not like give it any kind of merit or validity, I think that's kind of like, that's pretty crappy. And obviously, you were shaken up and you still are about that story, thinking back, especially the layer of it is that makes it emotional is like in front of your daughter's school. Like the significance of that, of like, that's how she will remember this whole thing, like that's a horrible, horrible thing, so like that's where the weight and the heaviness and the emotions come from. And you have every right to be like, yo, like, how could I share this story with you? And that's the first thing you say, like, oh, they just made a mistake. It's like, it's dismissive. It is pretty rude, so, but the fact that, so piggyback off that, like, tell me like about that. And,
so during that season, I think there was a couple things God was teaching me. Number one, I needed more people in my life that were willing to say hard things to me.
We all need that.
And so I needed people to point out, hey, bro, you're maybe packing on a few pounds, bro. I love you, but you're getting fat. Like, can you, like, maybe you need to lose some weight? You need people like that to hold you accountable in some areas. So through the season, I began to realize, during COVID, I think as hard as that was on everyone, we began to realize there was also opportunity to get better, right? There was opportunity for us to see blind spots in our life. And that's why I asked Elias, I need you to be a person, a friend to me, to see the blind spots in my racism, because I knew I had them and I knew there was a root of them. So circa 1991, I was going to school in South Dallas, and 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, I get pulled over in South Dallas because I'm a white guy driving in a part of town that I don't belong. So I get pulled out of my car by two really large African-American police officers and thrown into the street, knee in the back, knee in the neck. What are you doing? Call me all kinds of racist names because they assume that I'm somewhere I don't belong, up to no good, right? And so for years, I allowed myself as a white guy, every time something like George Floyd happened, I was always like, well, it goes both ways because it happened to me.
Interesting.
So I was literally sitting on my porch one morning and I was praying and just wrestling with God about, maybe there is some racist tendencies in me and the way I treat people because I have some deep rooted hurt on my own that I've never dealt with. Right. And so God spoke very clearly to me on my back porch. He said, Ken, maybe I allowed you to experience that, not so you would be angry about it, but maybe it was so you would have empathy for the people like Sly that deal with that all the time.
Right.
And you're with young men and so maybe God takes us through those opportunities in our life to experience things, not so we can get bitter about it, but so we can get better and understand and be more empathetic to people that deal with very hurtful situations much more than we do. And so I just was looking around going, who are the people in my life that can help me see those blind spots, right? And say hard things to me. They hear things come out of my mouth that maybe there is something that's racist that I don't even realize I'm saying, right? Because I want to be very careful that in the ministry environments we operate in, that I don't say things that are hurtful, whether it's intentional or not. I don't want to be hurtful to people or hurtful to the very people that we're trying to minister to. And that we're getting back to one of the original conversations we had, because you can lose trust so fast. Mm-hmm. You don't even mean to, just because you're ignorant, right? And so I wanted to grow out of my ignorance in some areas, and God uses His people to help you grow out of your ignorance in some ways. And so I'm just thankful that, God's, put us together as a team, and I think we help each other grow in a lot of ways. And so it's been really cool to watch, and it's cool in that kingdom environment we're talking about, because we work with multiple denominations, multiple theologies, people that agree with us on some things and don't. So how do we lead well with a bunch of people that may not agree, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be God's kingdom to do that, right?
That's right. All of us or none of us, you know?
Amen.
That's amazing. I love that. And I'm excited for y'all's podcast as a friend, as a fan, as a follower of Christ. I'm excited to hear what you guys got going on. And I know big things are in the cards for FCA. You guys are adding to the team now, which is awesome. And I know that's probably been super helpful, because I heard this thing last night that talked about like the more people that you have on the team, the more like blessings are going to come your way, because you have more people like with the same mission and the common mindset to go get those things and go do those things for the kingdom. So that's so cool that you added somebody recently, and you guys also have a couple events coming up. Share with me about that, and also adding to the team. What has that been like for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, FCA, just to give you a little bit of groundwork, FCA is 100% funded locally. So people think, oh, this is huge global organization that, you know, they funnel money down. So that's not the way it works. So we Sly and I raise support to do the ministry here in our community, right? And so, you know, that because of that, you know, you talk to people about, hey, come be a part of FCA ministry. And
Sounds like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, and you get and by the way, you get to go raise all the money to do it yourself, you know. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm good, you know. And so yeah, well, for many years, like our area here has only really ever had one staff person. And so just now we have two, now about to have three. We brought a young lady on named Ashlyn Power. She's phenomenal, going to be a huge addition to our team. She just graduated from Texas A&M Corpus Christi sports psychology, background. And so just even as we talked about mental health, and we just see how God's piecing it all together, right?
Yeah.
So the things are important, the things we need in our team, adding a female to the team, it's going to be huge. I mean, I can't tell you how fired up coaches, like female coaches and our athletes are in these communities where they hear, wow, we're going to have a girl like here serving us, ministering to us, discipling us, because, you know, it's weird. I mean, I took her to volleyball practice at one of the high schools the other day, and I walk in the door and like get all these girls standing there and the coach, and I'm the only guy in the gym, and I'm like, the reason she's here is because I'm not going to be the creepy old guy hanging out at volleyball practice,
Yeah,
right? You know,
sure.
so you know, there's certain environments like we can hang out and like it's really fun, and I love volleyball and I love hanging out with athletes, but you know, I ain't going to be weird about it, right? So having a female teammate is going to really grow the relationships there with her, and so she's been out raising her support. As of Friday, she's fully funded. You know,
Ooh, praise God!
Play the sounder on that, you know, because we got the yes, she's fully funded, so we're rolling. She's through. I got the HR stuff done, so we're rolling. So she's excited, and we're heading straight from here, going to a volleyball tournament to introduce her to some more coaches and students. And so, really excited to have her on the team. She and her fiance Josh be moving to Arlington, being here in the community with us. So fired up about that. And, you know, and just from an event perspective, you know, we have a kingdom event called Fields of Faith that we're doing it in Mansfield.
Fields of Faith. That's a great name. Fields of Faith.
Yeah, Fields of Faith is actually a global initiative of FCA. So
Perfect.
October 11th, there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of those happening all across the country the same night. Ooh. And so it's a huge opportunity to lead students to Christ and connect them to the local church. You know, we were talking a little bit earlier about the church. You know, and our mission statement is to lead every coach and every athlete into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and his church. So
That's right.
We're not the church, right? But we want to be a connector for students, for coaches, for people to the church. And so we're going to put on a big event, have a bunch of the local churches there to support it, encourage the students to bring their friends, and there'll be a clear presentation of the gospel. There'll be worship, and we're going to believe that a bunch of students and maybe some adults too are going to come to Christ that night, and it's going to be a eternal life-changing experience. So that's something we're really fired up about. Then that following Monday, right after that event, we'll have a golf tournament. Jim Sundberg, Texas Ranger Hall of Famer, host that golf tournament for us in Mansfield at Walnut Creek Country Club, and that's part of how we're helping fund some of this growth and some of these events is through a golf tournament. We'd never done one before. We've talked about it, but man, Jim Sundberg comes and says, "Hey, Ken, I'd be willing to help you guys with that and host it." And I'm like, let's go, So last year we did it for the first time, and it was a great day. It was a lot of fun, just connecting with people from the community, and we raised a bunch of money to help bring on teammates and to add and to be able to say yes to things like feeding teachers and doing things outside of the normal scope of ministry, because we had the resources to do that. We've given out hundreds of Bibles, and we gave the golfers an opportunity instead of buying raffle tickets and things. Sponsor a Bible for $25, and so we've given out a huge amount of Bibles in our area. We have FCA has athlete Bibles, coaches Bibles, so we've given out hundreds of those this year. So that's going to be another great opportunity, October 16th at Walnut Creek Country Club. If people want to come play in that, you can go to fcasouthwest.org to the events page on there and get more information about that if people want to play. So yeah, it's awesome.
I love that.
We also got, so don't forget tomorrow night.
Oh yeah,
we got an FCA back to school kickoff over at Walnut Ridge. So we'll have some students worshiping. So it'll be student led worship.
Wow.
And then we have a student, one of our former FCA students, that's a legacy graduate who just graduated this year, is going to be sharing. I'm not sure if she's going to share a testimony or just give a message tomorrow. But so we have that going on tomorrow night at 6:30.
Nice.
Getting the students ready to go back into the school year and know, okay, this is where my huddle's at. This is the time it is. This is where it's going to be located. So tomorrow night is going to be a great kickoff party.
If people wanted to get kind of plugged into FCA where they're living at, how would you recommend they best do that?
If they go to fca.org, and then there's a place on that says find local staff, and then they can punch in their zip code. And so everything we do is kind of by zip code. So they punch in the zip code, hit submit. It will pull up the contact information for the local staff person that's in charge of that area wherever they live. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, anywhere in the world, man. We got staff every state, just about every country now.
Well, there you go. I mean, we guys that are listening, you guys have heard the stories. You've seen the impact just based on the lives of these gentlemen sitting across from me. Personally speaking, I've seen just the fruit of that just from my own experiences character coaching, as well as my buddy Turner, who was just on a couple episodes ago, who shared a lot of really cool stories about his time and experiences in it. And it's just something that I really believe in. So if you guys are definitely wanting to get plugged into a ministry, you're like, where does, pray about it, ask God, where do you want me, Lord? And then if FCA kind of is what he puts on your heart, go seek it, and get involved. Just show up, just be, it's that presence we talk about. Go be a presence in these schools, in these locker rooms, with these coaches, with these teachers, with the parents of the students. It's just so the net is wide of how many people you can reach in this ministry. So much respect to you guys. We'll be on the lookout for Keeping It Kingdom. And I'm excited to help you guys out with that in any way I can. And just happy we were able to collab on this episode together. And truly appreciate y'all being here today.
Indeed. Thank you for having us. It's a true blessing.
Yeah.
You're a great friend of FCA, but also just a great friend to me. So thank you for that. I value you as a guy that I hope you feel like you can say hard things to me too. We're going to help each other grow and get better and do some kingdom work. So thank you for your coaching on the podcast stuff too. And just, looking forward to seeing what God does.
Zach, I want to say this quote that I heard the other day that kind of connects the dots here. And the quote is, you don't go as far as your dream, you go as far as your team.
Ooh,
so we can have dreams all day long.
That's right.
We can get to the dream, but if we want to go completely all the way, we got to have the right people in the right seat in our lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amen. I received that, man. And I'm learning more and more about that. I feel like God is really has me in this season of just connecting with people and building relationships and being intentional about involving people in what you have going on, because that's the way to really reach the full potential of what he has in store for you. And I'm just really seeing that. I used to think I was a one-man ministry, and then I was like, well, no, it's not. It is not. Maybe it means individually, going out there and being able to on the way to one ministry opportunity, stop and talk to a Levi and, minister in the workplace and stuff like that when you're solo dolo. But when it comes to the ministry that God has called you to, you definitely want to have a team around you. So I respect you guys for being able to say that and share that with the people today. So,
Amen.
Hey, I appreciate you guys. Taylor, thank you so much again. And for the listener, hey, if this is your first time here, do us a huge solid and subscribe to the show. If you'd like to pick up the book that we kind of mentioned on the show, it's called 21 Days in Africa. You can get that on Amazon or my website at ilikebirdsministry.com. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can do that as well. We truly appreciate you being here, and we'll see you on the next one. And please share this episode. Get it out there. Get FCA out there. Get I Like Birds out there. Get the hearts of the people listening to be able to go ahead and out there and spread the gospel as much as possible. I said that kind of weird, but you get the point. Share the show. All right, cool. Cheers. Thank you.